So, I wanted to make a list about climbing mountains, movies, and documentaries. So, it's just a short list of 12 movies that I found were very interesting, and they're about climbing mountains and some interesting stories about that, like random mountain trips. Most of these movies are from cold mountains, so there's a lot of snow and ice and a lot of cold. That's because I find these stories fascinating. So yeah, it's mostly cold mountains, mostly really high mountains that are getting cold. But yeah, I think I considered every movie because I watched a lot of movies about mountain climbing. I was just fascinated by this subject. And then I watched a ton of movies, like I don't know how many. I actually don't know how many. Let's say 30, 40, 50, I don't know. But there are 12 of them that I will recommend because I think they are well made and they are really entertaining, and they also tell us something about mountain climbing and tell us something about the equipment and what the people are thinking, and what they're thinking in disasters. And that's also one of the things that I thought about. There's a lot of disasters on this list, and that's it's kind of a sad thing about people and humanity, and stories that we have, that a lot of the disasters, a lot of the deaths we have, they are the stories that are being retold. They are the stories that are fascinating us, and the stories that we cannot forget. And unfortunately, that's how it is with these kind of movies. Some of these stories are disaster stories or survival stories. Most survival stories, mostly, because just a disaster is not really a story. It's just a disaster, nothing else. So yeah, it's about the human spirit, and I think the human spirit really shows itself when disaster strikes. So when you're on a mountain and you climb it and you climb down again, okay, there can be some suffering, but it's hard to understand the suffering because the people just talk about the cold, they just talk about the difficulties they have. So it's hard to really know if they are trying to entertain us or trying to exaggerate things or just trying to tell us how reality was. But when disaster strikes, you know that this is real. Okay, this is really a life and death situation. So it's exciting that way. But yeah, that's not that important actually. What is important is that I watched a ton of climbing mountains documentaries, everything I could find everywhere. So I just watched it all, and this is how I sorted them. Let's see what are snowy mountains. Yeah. And some documentaries would not be featured on the list, like for example, if there's no climbing, so, or if there's really little climbing in a movie, then it won't be featured on this list. Let's see, Touching the Void. This is my favorite climbing documentary. So, and of course I'm not including like regular climbing. I'm including hard conditions climbing, so cold climate climbing. By far the best one is Touching the Void. Not because the other ones are not good, but just because Touching the Void is just, I think it's in its own category. It's like a movie. It's like watching a movie. You're exciting. You're sitting on the edge. You're kind of following his story, and there's really a lot of humanity in this story because they're not pretentious and they're not acting like these guys are some heroes. They're just regular mountain climbers. They do stupid shit. Sometimes they say stupid things, and sometimes they can be assholes. But this is exciting, and Simon Yates will feature in another documentary. You'll see. So yeah, must watch, of course. Touching the Void. Touching the Void. Everyone knows it, and it's an exciting story because it's a survival tale. There's some complications. Something happens, then he survives by doing some extreme stuff. Okay, what about Everest? I actually like Everest a lot. It starts off kind of silly with this Keira Knightley, kind of silly things, silly scenes with her, where she's all touchy-feely, too emotional, and it's kind of, there's not much depth to it. But then they get to the mountain, and it starts getting more real. It starts to be grounded in real expeditions, so you kind of feel you're there on the mountain with them, and you kind of feel like you actually think that they're on the mountain because the scenes there are so realistic. So I'd say this is a great movie, and this is my second one on the list because, again, the entertaining factor is through the roof. It's really, really entertaining, and it's a lot of it is well made and well filmed, well acted. For example, Jake Gyllenhaal is in the movie. I think he will go down as one of the best actors of all time. But yeah, a lot of entertaining, and also it's based on true events, so the equipment you see is also real. But yeah, this is not the real story. The real story is more extreme, it will be, we get adult. It will be more adult story, because there's a lot of things happening. A lot of people are dying. So I suggest you read the book too, because the book is probably better than the movie. But the movie is good intro, and it's just entertaining. Meru is a nice one. No one dies here. It's just the climbing. And Conrad Anker, one of the great climbers. I saw some of the documentaries. I'm not climbing myself, so I don't know who does what, but I know that he's one of the good ones. Yeah, interesting, fascinating story about him when his partner dies and he marries his partner's ex-wife, and then she has 2 kids. So, and he goes climbing on Meru with 2 other guys, and one of the guy, he suffers a huge accident right like a few months before they have to climb, and we are not even sure if he can walk ever again in his life. And in the beginning we don't even know if he will survive the accident, but then he trains and he goes up with them. So really fascinating story, and no one dies. Great, fantastic. The summit. Oh yeah, this is an extreme story. I think I remember some of the scenes were kind of hard to decipher, because it was not really clear what went on and where. They were not. I don't think they had 3D graphics. 3D graphics is something that really could illustrate what goes on where. Maybe they had a few, like, graphics that showed, okay, they're there and they're there, but if they could just, maybe 5 minutes video before it all, where they kind of show 3D figures do something, and then you could see them go to a place and then something would happen to them, or maybe at the end, something like that, because these some of these documentaries are hard to follow, because I think these climbers are kind of in their own little world, kind of egoistic, and kind of have maybe some of them have a hard time understanding story structure and time scales, because there's so much in the mountains that these things kind of become abstracts. So a lot of these stories kind of go in one direction, and then they start over from a different storyline, and then go in a different direction, and then it all kind of gobbles together. But yeah, it's still I don't know if it's a must watch. Yeah, go watch it, because it's a great documentary. I really like it. I could rewatch it again. It was really exciting to watch, actually. But I do wish some of these were better made. They're not. Again, Everest is not perfect, and it could be an 8 actually if it was a bit more realistic. So there's a few elements that are not true to real story. So, but still, it's not. And Meru, it's just a basic story. It's not really. Yeah. It's not really hitting the top of the top of documentaries or movies. And then Beyond the Edge. This is actually a great retelling. It's a bit long, and I like that it's long. It's great, because it's a historical retelling. They use some actors to recreate the first climb of Mount Everest with Tenzing Norgay and Edmund Hillary. They both climbed Everest together and reached the summit at the same time. It was like you can see, it was a 53, and actually the climb is not that hard compared to other climbs. For example, K2, the summit, and K2, they are both set on K2, and it's a much harder mountain to climb than Everest, and much more dangerous. I think like 25% of people, or maybe 10%, I don't know how many today, but maybe 10% of people who go climbing in the K2, they die there. So kind of extreme. I don't know how many on Everest, maybe 5% or something. I don't know the exact numbers. Sometimes it could be like 25% if it's a real high mountain or hard mountain. So yeah, but it's a great retelling of the famous story. So yeah, it's interesting to watch. I don't know, they're famous because they are the first ones. So that's it. So it's kind of silly, right? Because whatever, first ones, who cares? But yeah, it is what it is. K2, this one is a movie, not a documentary. I actually liked it a lot. When I watched it, it kind of felt like it was a theater play. So I watched it and thought, hey, this could be made into a theater play, and it could function really well. It's not that I ever go to theater, I don't. But then I read a bit about it later afterwards, and I found out that it was actually a theater play made into a movie, and totally makes sense because you can see everything is set up in these dramatic long scenes. So yeah, definitely. And it's actually a good movie. The acting is a bit bad by some of the actors, and maybe a bit silly at time, and you can also really feel that it's from 91. Again, they use old equipment, old clothes, and old climbing clothes. It's really weird. Like you can see, it's red and yellow and orange, and it looks kind of weird. And also, it's about some of these climbers. None of these climbers are amateurs, because if you go to K2, you need to be in extremely good shape. But some of these climbers are kind of amateurish in how they see the world. So they are professional in how they climb, but some of the decisions are kind of weird because they're not in a professional setting. They're not working for a company. They don't have they don't have tight bureaucracy or structure, so sometimes they're a bit free-spirited. And you can really feel it in this movie that these climbers, it's like they're based on real climbers, because this is actually how climbers think. They're free-spirited, they want to try things, they want to be there, they want to conquer a mountain, and they do really stupid stuff, like if their girlfriend cries and doesn't want them to go, they still go because they really want to climb the mountain. So they're kind of crazy people, and I think I really like this movie because it's really great at showing how some of these mountain climbers really are as people. Vertical Limit. It's actually, I saw it in 2000, so it's I saw it some time ago, but I liked it when I saw it. I thought it was enjoyable, a lot of fun, a lot of action, a bit silly, and maybe the ending was a bit silly. I don't know what I wanted back then, but maybe I wanted them all to survive. No spoiler. But I liked it back then. I don't know if I would like it today. Maybe I would like it more. A lot of bad movies, so when a decent movie comes along, I really like it. Cliffhanger. This is one of the action B movies classic, because it is a B movie. It is what it is, and a lot of the scenes are really silly. Like some of the helicopter scenes really look like B movie, action B movie. But when it works, it really works. So some of these scenes are still considered classic scenes today because they really work. You really feel the tension, you really feel the excitement, and really feel his suffering. This is Stallone when he's best, Sylvester Stallone, because he's great at suffering, and he's also great at being the tough guy while suffering. Yeah, I remember this. Miracle on Everest. It's actually a really nice and exciting story. Again, this is one of the stories that everyone can watch. I think these movies are really accessible. Again, close to that, no one can reach him. So, what will happen to him? And then somehow we discover that what they thought is wrong, because it's already revealed here, so I can reveal it anyway. And of course, I don't mind spoiling anything. He survives on the mountain, but everyone thought that it was impossible. So they always need to rethink what they think about humanity when they think about mountains and how to climb them, because a lot of stuff happens and then they have to rethink stuff. And again, when you're on a mountain, you don't know what will happen and when it will happen. So random people can die. Today, Mount Everest is not one of the hardest mountains to climb. K2 is much harder. So in principle, kids can climb Mount Everest with a bit of training, but random people die on Mount Everest. Suddenly someone dies somewhere, so you don't know who will die. A kid can climb Mount Everest and then come down again, or maybe next to him is a super athlete and one of the best climbers in the world that can die suddenly because something happens. The mountains always move, snow moves, ice moves, a lot of storms are incoming, so stuff happens. Also, old people can climb Mount Everest, but again, there's a chance you die, probably 5%, 6%, something like that. So, Beckoning the Silence is this guy, Joe Simons, wasn't it? Joe Simpson. This is the guy, yeah. I was talking about him before. Joe Simpson. I'm really bad at names. He's retelling a story of Beckoning the Silence story about now I'm bad at names and stuff like that, but I think they were Austrian climbers on the Eagle. So they went there and tried to conquer the mountain, and it's a really hard mountain. And this was right before World War II, so they didn't have the best mountain climbing equipment, and also some of the storms and weather conditions were hard to predict, so you don't know what will happen when you're on the mountain. And this is a fantastic story. I really like it, actually. But I think there are more documentaries about this, but this is the best one. There's also a movie about it, and it's well made, actually. So it is realistic. The equipment they use and the settings and the mountain is fantastically made. I think it's a German movie, so the effects are fantastic, but the story is just not true. This is not what happened. So it's kind of dramatization of the real story, and a lot of the elements are just moved around or changed for no reason whatsoever. So, and this is Joe Simon telling the story out from his own experiences. So he kind of, again, this is a mishmash. So, and this is actually what's bad about these kind of documentaries, because first of all, a lot of them are mishmash. So they're not telling the story in linear fashion. They probably went to a mountain, filmed a lot of stuff, and then they kind of put it all together in their studio, and there's not really a clear line, not a clear storyline, and it's really hard to see where the hell they were on the mountain at what time, because they just jump around. They're telling the story to someone who have been on the mountain, which obviously I have not been. So that's the other mistake. This is the first one, but actually the other mistake is that a lot of these climbing movies are about the landscape and about the mountain, about the snow and ice, and kind of scenography and scenes about nature, because in a lot of these climbing trips not much happens, so they have to make it about something, and that something is what they filmed. And what can they film? They can film themselves, or they can film the snow. So it could become a bit artsy, so, and a bit boring, like a nature documentary, really boring documentary, with no information, just nature. Yeah. And 7 Years in Tibet. There are a few climbing scenes, and I added it because it's a great movie. So it's worth watching just for the enjoyment of it. And the few climbing scenes make it somewhat a climbing movie. At least these two guys were real guys. The Henrik Haar was at least a real guy. So, and he really went to Tibet, and it's not really a true story, but he was a real guy, and he was a real Nazi and stuff like that. But again, he was really egoistic, like many of these climbers. So how are you a Nazi and a egoist, and self-centered, and try to go your own way and be yourself? That's hard, right, to fit together. So he was just a marketing tool for them, but in reality he was just himself. He didn't care about any of these huge organizations for groups of people. Dying for Everest. There are a lot of these kind of documentaries when you follow blind people, or maybe young people, or new climbers or experienced climbers doing something, going on a mountain, and usually they film it, so usually you have some scenes from the mountain. It can be exciting, and I think this one was stood out because it was well made and it was exciting, and it's not too long, so that's what's great about it. Let's see. Some of these documentaries actually have real scenes from the real mountain. I think Beyond the Edge is filmed on Mount Everest. Pretty sure it is. And a lot of these movies, this Meru, they brought a camera with them. The Summit, I think also they have quite a few scenes from the mountain. I'm not totally sure. I think they have. So sometimes they bring a camera with them, and if something goes wrong, they often can recover the camera. That's also exciting. So unfortunately I only have 12 movies, because I won't add a movie with only a 6-star rating. I will only add 7 stars or higher. So I've seen a lot of movies, and I could make a list with maybe 100 of them if I watched a few more, but this is what I have today.